Once upon a time, at the far hem of a vast green jungle, a small hut leaned into the wind as if listening for kindness. Its roof was patched with tin that rattled like coins in rain. Its doorway was a curtain that breathed in and out like a sleeping animal. In that hut lived a woodcutter, his wife, and their only son, Eli, a 14-year-old boy with soft brown hair, a face thinned by lean seasons, and eyes that stayed gentle even when his stomach did not. Each dawn, before the sun lifted its first bright coin over the trees, Eli's parents took up an old axe and a coil of rope and stepped beneath the tall sal and teak. The forest paid them in small change, just enough to keep going, never enough to stay full. Most mornings began with a pot too light, a fire too quiet, a hope too thin to stand on its own feet. Eli learned early that hunger has many voices: the empty clatter of a ladle on metal, the slow ache that makes a child walk more carefully, the silence in a mother's smile. He loved the jungle that never mocked him for being small. Sunlight fell through leaves and drifting coins. Parrots stitched bright lines from branch to branch. A banyan by the stream held a whole city of nests and charged no rent. Even danger kept its dignity here. It did not jeer, it did not whisper. It only was. One pink morning, when mist still sat on the grass like a thought not yet spoken, Eli lifted the rice pot and found only the memory of steam. His parents had left early. On a sliver of bark by the hearth, his mother had scratched with charcoal. Went early, heavy work today, will try to be home by dusk. Love. The word love wore a thumb smudge like a small eclipse. He boiled water, added a pinch of salt, and drank the thinness. Warmth traveled his throat and left his belly emptier than before. He stood in the doorway where a single step backward meant ash and a single step forward meant trees, and something in him broke the way ice breaks. Quiet, then all at once. Tears came. He tried to hold them back to save the salt. They came anyway. "I'm hungry," he told the morning. "I'm so hungry." The jungle listened, because the jungle listens to everything. Leaves lifted, birds hushed, the air thickened with attention, as if a room full of elders had stood at once. From the high grass beyond the path, a shape gathered itself from shadow and sunlight and stepped out. A mother royal Bengal tiger, massive, banded, gold and black, eyes like afternoon amber, whiskers like white signatures upon the air. She moved with the patience of a river that remembers the sea. Eli's whole body said run. His feet forgot how. The tiger tasted the air. She lowered herself a fraction, not a leap, not yet, but the memory of one. Pain tightened her middle, her tail cut the air, slowed, cut again. Something was wrong. What Eli did not know, but somehow understood, before dawn she had given birth, and the cub had not woken. Milk had come anyway, urgent and aching. With no small mouth to ease it, her body throbbed as if a tight knot had been tied beneath her ribs. A tiny bead of milk gathered along white fur, and by its own small weight fell onto a leaf that bent and straightened as if nodding to a truth. Eli saw. He did not grasp the whole of it, he grasped hunger and hurt. He lifted his hands to show them empty, an old language older than words. He lowered his gaze so his eyes would not challenge, and he slowed his breath until it matched the forest's. "Please," he whispered, not sure whether he spoke to the tiger, the morning, or his fear. He took one step, then paused, then another, choices laid down where a great animal could read them. The tiger's lips lifted off perfect teeth. A low sound hummed in her chest, not rage, but bewildered pain. Still, she did not retreat. Eli knelt on damp earth. He waited. The tiger exhaled a long, shuddering breath that trembled the air like heat above a road. Then she shifted her stance a little, and the slow leak of milk beaded and fell again, this time onto a cupped leaf Eli held reverently beneath, letting the leaves do the touching and the forest be the bowl. He sipped, only enough to soften the fire in his belly. The milk tasted warm and strange and kind, like comfort found where no one would think to look. He stopped quickly because hunger can teach greed and love can teach limit, and both lived in him. Relief loosened the 1,000 tight wires in the tiger's body. The ache eased as water eases a burn. She made a rolling sound that lived more in the bones than the ears, then stepped back, watching him with a gaze not human in gratitude, but ancient in recognition, the way mountains recognize rain. After a time, she turned and dissolved into tall grass, swallowed by green. Eli stayed kneeling long after the last blade forgot her weight. When he stood, he felt less hollow, as if the world had given him back a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing. That evening, when his parents returned bowed under bundles, he ran to meet them and lifted the rope from his father's shoulder. They boiled a small meal, and he ate slowly, thanking each grain with care instead of words. His mother watched him, and for the first time in weeks, felt peace arrive and pull up a chair without asking if there was room. At dawn, he returned to the bend where the grass still remembered a giant. Mist folded and unfolded. A spider repaired what the dew had damaged. He waited long enough to almost give up. Then leaves parted and the mother tiger came again. They greeted each other the careful way old enemies become new neighbors, slowly, with choices meant to be read. Eli waited for her to decide. She decided. He caught a little milk on a broad leaf and sipped. She eased. Both stepped back from the small mercy with dignity. Not every day, wildness has its rhythm, but often enough that the jungle carved a quiet path around their meetings. His cheeks filled, the gray in his eyes warmed to brown. He still ate everything his mother cooked. He took only enough from the leaves to turn panic into patience. His parents noticed his steadiness and did not ask. Some mercies keep their shape by staying unspoken. In the village, boys who had laughed now watched him lift a grain sack as if it were a promise, not a burden. A little girl with ribbons offered him a guava and did not snatch her hand back. He split it and gave her half, 2 bites each, a laugh between. Days turned. Eli learned small things that grow large, that clouds carry weight you can read in the flight of swallows, that a snake's temper shows at the angle of its tongue, that ants move uphill the day before rain. He learned to grow quiet inside, because certain footsteps can only be heard when your own are soft. Then, trouble arrived like a drum. From the village lane came shouting and the thunder of something huge. "The elephant," someone cried, "mad with fear!" The bull elephant from the king's palace had forced its way through a gate left foolishly open. Panic turned its strength into storm. It snapped fence posts like dry twigs, sent goats skittering, and made the ground ring with its charge. A few brave men tried to be a wall. The elephant swept them aside the way tide sweeps a leaf. Eli stepped into the road. His parents reached for him, too late. He didn't think. His body remembered the tiger's lesson. Listen first. He planted his feet. He held his hands low and open. He breathed until his ribs forgave his heart. The elephant bore down, ears fanned, trunk lashing the dust. Hot breath hit Eli's face like a door blown open. He looked not at tusks, but into the space between the eyes, where fear and rage sometimes shake hands. "I see you," he said, though the noise swallowed the words. "I see the hurt behind the noise." The elephant veered half a pace, uncertain. Eli matched the veer, opening a pocket of safety where momentum could forget its orders. The trunk slammed earth inches from his toes. Dust leaped and fell. He did not jump. He lowered his hands to his sides. Not surrender, invitation. He took a small step and set both palms gently to the giant's brow. Pebbled heat. A living ocean moved under his fingers. Up close, he saw the red rim of the eye and the almost tears ashamed to fall. He did not command. He steadied. The great body swayed, sighed once, sighed again. A fever broke like a knot loosening. The trunk dropped like a heavy rope finding the dock. He turned and walked backward, drawing the elephant away from narrow houses toward the river's council. Reeds nodded, kingfishers stitched blue. At the bank, the elephant drank and shivered, and calm stepped back in through the doorway relief had opened. Palace handlers arrived late and breathless, ropes slack in their hands. They stared at Eli as if he were a piece of magic they had carelessly mislaid, and he had kindly returned. News flies the way seeds do. It catches somewhere and grows. Before the sun had moved 2 finger widths, the king sent for the boy. The palace was honey-colored stone and green shade, a geometry of arches and courtyards, and a neem tree older than half the stories carved in the pillars. Guards leaned on spears, not from boredom, but because spears are heavy and backs appreciate mercy. Children of courtiers peered around columns at the thin boy whose eyes carried forest light. The king sat beneath the neem tree. He was not tall the way legends prefer, but he wore his crown as if it were a thoughtful book. When Eli bowed, the king raised a hand to stop him halfway, the right length between strangers and friends. "You calmed my elephant," the king said. "No chains, no shouting, no cruel tools. How?" Eli bought of stripes in mist and leaves cupped like bowls. Some gifts keep their shape by remaining where they were given. "I listened to the fear behind the noise," he said. The king studied him as one studies a rare seed. He saw thin wrists steadied by purpose, a boy whose gaze did not flinch. "There is a kind of strength I cannot command from a forge," he said. "I would have you serve this land with it." Eli pictured the hut, the rice jars pour echo, his parents' shoulders, the way morning mist hangs in trees. "I will try," he said. "Trying," said the king, "is how doing begins." He beckoned a steward. "See that his family wants for nothing. A sound roof and a full cupboard are the soil where courage grows." That evening, sacks of rice leaned like quiet guests in the hut. A jar of oil glowed like bottled sunset. Eli's mother pressed her forehead to it in a private prayer. His father touched the sacks with a carpenter's careful fingers, as if measuring the truth. Still, Eli patched the roof because gifts do not replace hands. He planted 2 papaya trees that would outgrow him if luck held. He visited the palace to learn gentler arts, how to calm a high-strung mare with breath and stillness, how to read a crowd the way one reads weather, how to step between angry men like water, not a wedge. He failed sometimes. Failure taught him patience that didn't have a cheaper price. In the earliest mornings, when mist braided itself among trunks and the river forgot it had anywhere to be, he walked to the bend where grass remembered a giant. Sometimes she came, silent as a secret becoming a promise. Sometimes not. He never demanded. Love that is demanded forgets its name. When she did come, he bowed a little, she allowed a little. Both left with a little more ease than they had brought. He never followed where she went, Some mysteries remain themselves by being allowed to remain. A quarrel bloomed at the boundary of two fields, a thin strip of earth claimed by two stories. Voices rose, dust rose. Names got said that good men regret after dark. The king sent Eli. He did not arrive with orders. He listened until each man had told his truth twice and begun to hear the fatigue in his own version. He pointed with an open hand to the boy in one man's arms and the girl clutching the other's shirt, and asked what harvest a field of anger yields that children can eat. By dusk, agreement lay like a third shadow, thin but real. That evening, the forest rose into a hush that was not the usual hush. It felt like witnesses counting. Leaves parted. The mother tiger stepped onto the path with a solemn grace time had stitched into her. No ache twisted her belly now. Other aches had replaced it. The kind knowing leaves behind. She studied him a long moment, and in that gaze, Eli felt the measure of what he had become because a mercy had once crossed a boundary both of them honored. Without deciding to, he went to one knee. Her whiskers trembled. She dipped her head an inch, not submission, but acknowledgement. Then she turned and vanished into green. Eli walked home through a world that seemed ordinary and, at the same time, carefully arranged for him to pass. On the hut stoop, he sat with his parents beneath a sky pricked with small fires. Fireflies revised the air. The papayas looked comic with promise. His father sighed the sigh that means enough. His mother hummed the old boat song about how even stubborn rivers find the sea. Eli listened and felt something inside him settle into a shape that fit. Days followed that did not need to be chased. People began to call Eli when storms of anger gathered at the market gate, when a snake curled in a classroom corner, when a skittish mare refused a bridge, when an old woman's well soured and neighbors accused shadows. He came with listening and left quiet behind. The king called him the king's giant, not for size, but for the size of his courage and the gentleness that carried it. He wore no armor but steadiness, no weapon but breath, no crest but the memory of stripes and sunbeams. He did not forget where he came from. Each evening he returned to the little hut with the patched roof and the papayas that meant plenty someday. He ate with his parents and asked about small things, a new handle on the axe, the way the goat had learned to open the gate with its lips, the song a neighbor's baby had learned by accident. When he had more than the day required, he left a little with someone whose jar echoed louder than his ever had. A village can grow from such habits the way a forest grows from rain. Sometimes in the deep blue before dawn, he still walked to the bend in the path to wait. Sometimes the mother tiger came, and he cupped a leaf and took only a sip, and she eased, and both left with a dignity made of trust. Sometimes she did not, and he stood in the listening and let the empty place be a teacher too. One afternoon, the village shook with panic again. Not tusks this time, flame. A cooking shed had caught and jumped to a second roof. Fear ran ahead of the fire and did damage of its own. People shouted and scattered. Some grabbed buckets, some grabbed children, some grabbed stories about who was to blame. Eli did not shout. He sent 5 to the well with cloths, not pots. Soaked cloths smother faster than buckets douse. He had others pull down a fence to make a break the fire could not leap. He asked someone with a clear voice to sing a steady rhythm for passing water. Fear loses tempo in the face of song. The blaze faltered, then lowered its head, then died. Soot wrote lines on every face. Laughter came back in startled bursts. Out of the wreck, neighbors built a better cooking shed than the old, higher from the ground, and faced to the wind. Later, someone would say the shed was stronger because it had already fallen once. On a thin moon, Eli unrolled a cloth map in lantern light. Threads of ink he could only see when the flame leaned revealed old paths to older places, a bridge that asked riddles before it allowed a step, a marsh that echoed footsteps backward, a hill whose shadow wandered at midday. Work waits for the willing. He touched the map with the respect he gave to living things. He did not need adventure to feel large, but the land had needs, and he had promised. Before he slept, he stepped outside. The hut breathed. The papayas held their funny moon shapes. Far off, the river thought out loud. He looked toward the bend where grass remembers a giant and smiled. Somewhere in the dark, a presence as old as stories turned and looked back, and the world felt, for a moment, perfectly balanced on the point between danger and kindness. In the morning, he would wake and work, and listen first, and carry strength gently. He would be, as the king had named him, a giant of the heart. And somewhere under the oldest trees, Mercy would walk on silent paws, leaving a print beside a boy's footprint. Two marks traveling together towards whatever the day asked next.